Okay, I'm now showing 6 o'clock on my phone. Is that okay? It looks like we're all here. Okay, thanks. Appreciate it. Appreciate the thumbs up. All right, I believe we're present here, so I will call this meeting of the Manchester Springs City Council to order. This is January the 12th, 2021. This is a work session. If the city clerk would please call the roll.
Yes. Council members John Chada.
Here.
Judith Chandler.
Present.
Julie Wolf.
Here.
Steve Bremner.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Nancy Fortune.
Present.
Mayor John Graham.
Present.
And I'm noting that Susan Wolbrick is excused absent.
Yes, she is excused. Okay. And just a quick note, if anyone wants to eat during the meeting, please feel free. I had takeout from the keg tonight, so it's a good opportunity to get a little boost to our local businesses. So great. Thank you. I would like to take this opportunity. This isn't on the agenda, but this came up actually last night. So I just like to quickly mention, I've been contacted, I think probably others of you have been contacted by members of the public. They're concerned about public safety in light of some of the things that have happened in the national capital and so forth. And while we have a more complete audience tonight, I'd like to mention that the police chief does not believe that there are any credible threats in the area. We have interagency agreements with other jurisdictions. We don't think there's any unreasonable risk or really any risk, but the police chief's continuing to monitor the situation. So people, I think, should be calm by that and push forward, and let's try to live normal, happy lives. Okay. That said, we have 3 topics tonight for discussion. The first is the Pikes Peak Region Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan. And Denise, I believe Karen is going to do the introduction on that.
She should be coming over now.
Okay, great.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, Mayor Graham and council members. Thank you for adding this item to the work session agenda this evening. So our purpose is to provide background on the Pikes Peak Region Multi-Hazard Mitigation Plan and to describe, present a clear understanding of why we participate in this regional plan and what the benefits are for participating in the plan. And so we want to share information and answer questions this evening. We have a team of Pikes Peak Region staff here as well. And then next week, we've included this item in the regular work session agenda, and we'll present a resolution of adoption. The staff who developed this plan has asked that council consider adopting this resolution. And so I'd like to introduce several members of the Pikes Peak Region Office of Emergency Management staff who are with us this evening. And so first, Michael Schaub is the project manager for this very comprehensive plan. Jim Reed, who's the director of Pikes Peak Region OEM, is also with us, as well as Lonnie Inzer, who's deputy director. And I'll just note that Mike Schaub assisted the city with recovery from the 2013 flooding, and Lonnie Inzer actually participated with us to develop our local hazard mitigation plan.
So Karen,
Yes.
I don't see Lonnie on there, but I do see a person who's got a name of Pikes Peak Emergency Management. So I'm going to bring that person over and hopefully it's Lonnie.
Sounds good, thanks.
Okay.
So I'll just provide a little bit of background, and then Mike will delve into the plan a little bit more. I know it's an extremely large plan, and I know we can count on him to help condense this for you. So
Sure.
By way of a little bit of background, the city first participated in a regional plan in about 2014. And so at that time, the plan was managed by El Paso County, and it was it was a regional plan with jurisdictions from out of region participating. And that plan was adopted in 2015. And so I believe this was our city's first involvement in hazard mitigation plan. And then, of course, we developed our own local plan that was adopted in 2017. And so the regional plan is, as you would expect, on a regional scale. And so it addresses hazards quite comprehensively, but at a somewhat higher level. And so in terms of Manitou Springs, we had several staff who participated. Lieutenant Brad Doris with the fire department participated. Representing fire department is our incident disaster command. And I participated as well in the group that is called the local planning committee for the plan. And so I'll let Mike provide more information on this, but I guess benefits to us would include helping us to get a more clear understanding of our regional risks and how our level of risk fits into that. This is critically important because, of course, many hazards, particularly wildfire, are very fluid, a little bit harder to define in terms of location. And we know from the Waldo Canyon fire, they can have impacts throughout our region. Also, as a community, we work closely with the other jurisdictions in our region for mutual aid assistance for disasters. And so I think also it's very helpful in terms of helping us understand some different approaches to hazard mitigation. And I know as I was reviewing the plan, I saw that there is a major section about financial resources and goals and objectives to promote regional cooperation. And then finally, by participating in this plan, the city will continue to be eligible to apply for federal hazard mitigation grants. And so I think I'll turn things over to Mike, and he has a brief presentation to share with you.
Thanks, Karen. Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. Thank you for your time tonight, and we really appreciate working with Karen on this. She's made our job easy with one of the 7 municipalities that we've been working with. So I'm going to attempt to share my screen here, some quick slides. So please be patient. Can you see that? Can anybody see that? You good? Okay. And you're hearing me okay. All right. So let me just move this around here. By all means, during this presentation, if you've got any questions, please let myself, Jim, or Lonnie know. And then at the end too, it'll be relatively brief discussion, but at the end, if you want to hold your questions till then, that's perfectly fine. But first of all, and Karen kind of touched upon all these pretty much, but why do we really need a hazard mitigation plan? We're going to dig into that. Why does FEMA require it? For some grants in particular, they do require it. We'll talk about that. What does FEMA expect out of a city or a town or county or a state even when it comes to the basics of the plan? And then what are the key plan takeaways? We dropped 80 grand in federal taxpayer dollars. This is a FEMA grant to get this plan written. And what do we get out of it? And I'm going to tell you some of the key takeaways, and it's basically a hazard profile. And then, as Karen mentioned, some of the mitigation strategies that we would all work on in the next 5 years potentially before the plan needs to be rewritten or at least updated. I'll wrap things up by just telling you where we're at in the overall planning cycle and where FEMA's at with the plan that you're being presented with. And then finally, we'll wrap up with really the benefits. And Karen touched upon these, but I'll touch upon them as well, just to emphasize them. Why do we really want a plan? So hazard mitigation planning is really, it's not just writing a plan and putting it on a shelf for 5 years. This is not that type of plan. I know that we have a lot of those in government. This isn't one of them. It's actually supposed to be pulled off the shelf even without disasters once every year, and local communities get together to optimize and execute mitigation strategies based off of what the plan identified as hazards. The plan will hopefully, as written and as executed by all of us, reduce loss of life and property damage by minimizing the impact of disasters. And it really does begin with local governments identifying their profiled hazards and their capabilities, and then coming up with overall risk assessments. What this is not, it is not a response plan. It's not for first responders. It's not tactical. It's not down to the subdivision level for evacuations for a Waldo Canyon style fire either. This is identifying hazards at the regional level and then sometimes down at the municipal level, including your town. But we are not in the business. This is 550 pages already, and we are not in the business of doing specific evac plans for mountain shadows, for example. There are other plans and mechanisms by which we can do that. Why do we need a hazard mitigation plan? Pretty simple. Congress is really pressuring FEMA in the last 10 to 15 years to stop going back into places that are repeat failures, right? Repeat dam failures, hurricane damage, and constantly rebuilding the same government infrastructure. And there's three ways that that FEMA has answered this call, this push by Congress to mitigate against future disasters. And one of them, and the best one, is what you would, if you've ever heard of this, FEMA Public Assistance 406 mitigation. And it's just a category of money that's come out in the last 5 to 6 years, and it's great. For example, the 2015 floods, you had numerous dams that were damaged during that flooding event. With the 406 program, let's say you had $1 million historic dam being damaged, $1 million in damage. What the 406 authorized Congress and FEMA to do, Program 406, is to match that $1 million to rebuild that dam back to pre-disaster with another up to $1 million to mitigate against future damages, to make the dam more resilient, tougher, right, to deflect debris that's flowing down through Fountain Creek. So that is where a lot of the money is that FEMA is throwing at this mitigation effort. Another one is most of you may know about 404 mitigation. That's the Hazard Mitigation Grant Program. It's highly competitive. It's annual. It's nationally competitive. And at any given moment, any town in Colorado can have a 404 grant going on with FEMA. Finally, and to bring it home to us, FEMA paid for this. So they're pushing towns, counties, as well as states to adopt a hazard mitigation plan. And we've already talked about the reason and why they're good. Good at potentially eliminating or at least mitigating against future damages from floods or fires, especially in our case. Where are we at in the process right now? Well, we really started organizing in November, December of last year. We selected our contractor. The county was the sub-applicant for this grant. And after that, we were off running. By February, we had all of our stakeholders, including Manitou Springs employees, Calhan, Rama, Monument, Green Mountain Falls, City of Colorado Springs, and county people, school districts, fire districts. We all participated in the initial planning meeting. And that's where we really decided and asked questions about what are your greatest risks or hazards within your community. And we got a lot of feedback. And then the hard part, and the part that our contractors really kicked into, and this is where the science is involved in, is really identifying the threats. So the threats posed by earthquakes, by wildfires, etc. Typically it involves geospatial layers, as I'll show you in a minute. But most of the money and time went to the scientific analysis of the hazards that the people of Manitou Springs, as well as Colorado Springs and El Paso County and other municipalities actually identified as the key hazards. And then they're racked and stacked, and you come up with a risk assessment. FEMA doesn't really tell you how to do that risk assessment as long as you're consistent across all of your hazards. So you need to be consistent when you're ranking fire, wildfire versus earthquakes, for example, the same scoring system. And so what we came up with was relatively simple. Out of 100 points or 100%, 25% went to the probability of a actual hazard occurring. 25% went to the severity of it if it did occur. And then to a lesser extent, We had spatial extent was 18%. Warning time, which is big with Manitou Springs, you know, with being a channelized area with Fountain Creek right up there. Warning time was 18%. And finally, environmental impact was 14%. So all that goes into the risk assessment. And then we move down there to the bottom and we start talking to government entities, local municipalities such as yours about, okay, what strategies do we have in Manitou, in Monument, in El Paso County to mitigate against what we just identified as the greatest risks? And then, and this is the phase we're in right now, adoption. We're going around making sure all the local towns and communities are happy with the plan as presented. And then the real work begins when Karen and I start interacting about a year from now, when we start on an annual basis, we will sit down with all of the stakeholders and we will talk about the mitigation strategies and see if we're following what we said we would do. For example, make that dam stronger to avoid another Fountain Creek flood, for do some wildfire mitigation in the WUI, the wildland urban interface, for example. So lots of different, lots of different steps, but thankfully we're almost done. And again, FEMA doesn't really require a whole lot, but the basics are right there. And I've mentioned these already. I'm going to just pick out one to show you, just what I'm talking about when it comes to a lot of geospatial data and a lot of layers. Most of this geospatial data for the wildfire hazard came from the Colorado State Forestry Service. The red areas are historic fires. The heat map actually is indicative of our entire county. The hotter the color, the more prone for a wildland urban interface fire. And that's based upon vegetative growth, any buildings around it, and any previous mitigation that's been done. So lots of factors go into it. And you can see that the metropolitan area of Colorado Springs itself is relatively free from the hazard. And that's because we're focused on wildfires and not on property or buildings that are actually burning, right? This risk is really worried about the wildland urban interface. And if I could point your focus down to the bottom, you can see that Manitou Springs, as well as quite a few other the local municipalities, when it all came out with the risk assessment, it's high, and that should be no surprise to you. Now we're almost done. I just want to run you through the 20 hazards and only point out those where Manitou is high in. And I was fortunate enough to work with Jack Benson in 2014 on the 2013 floods, and then with subsequent town management for the 2015 floods as well. So no surprise, Manitou Springs is way up there when it comes to the risk of flooding, both from Waldo Canyon burn scar, but also from just traditionally Fountain Creek. If there are no questions here, I'll go on to the final portion of the hazard. And then to point out, mud or debris flow is high for Manitou Springs and also wildfire, as we talked about. So a lot of science went into this for earthquakes, for example. Historic data, the fault lines that are running, especially up by Monument in particular, were looked at. So there's a lot of science in that, and that's where a lot of the money and time went to on this. And that's why typically counties and cities contracted out, especially for the hazard profiles. So mitigation strategies, this is just a snapshot. This is one of the first few that Karen and I and her team will be talking to us about on an annual basis. So this is in the plan, and this is really where towns and the county of El Paso County, and then all the towns actually put down on paper what we want to do to mitigate against the known hazards that we just showed you. And then we try to keep each other honest on an annual basis. We will come together, whether virtually or physically, hopefully physically at OEM, and we will sit down and go through them line by line and get an update. And if Monument, for example, had an enhanced 911 service on their list, and on year 2 of this plan, they tell us they can't afford it, there's not enough money in their budget, we delete it, we take it out. FEMA is okay with that as long as you document when and why you're doing things, right? You're moving forward with strengthening that dam, or you're not because of budgetary limitations. So really the work is relatively easy once this plan is approved, because we've got our, we know where we're starting from, and we can only improve from there. Finally, what does the plan give you? Karen touched upon this, but for those of you with a military background, it really does provide a good common operational picture of both the risks in the area and mitigation strategies. It's a good go-to place if you want to tell a private citizen what are really the risks of earthquakes up Butte Pass, or of mud or debris flow. You can just pull out that chapter and dig into it and become almost an expert on it. It also allows for the optimization and mitigation efforts. So if Karen sees that El Paso County in an unincorporated area is actually doing fire mitigation efforts, clearing deadfall, for example, and it's right on the border with Manitou Springs, she may end up talking to Manitou Springs Fire Department and talk about potentially, synergizing that impact by doing a dual project that turns into one, since we're right on the border. So finally, it does improve the chances of actually securing grant opportunities at the federal level. There's one or two national grants that are mitigation focused, potentially lots of money, that you as a town or city or county actually have to have a plan for you to be eligible. And I realize that Manitou Springs has already got a great mitigation plan, and we've made sure that all of your mitigation strategies are included in the overall county plan. So I know that was rather long-winded, but does anybody have any questions or comments for us?
Council, do we have questions for Mike? Councilor Wolf, please.
Thank you. This is maybe more of a comment, perhaps. I don't know if it's for him or for us, but I found it very time consuming to go through this. And I think for this year, it would be very helpful to us and the public if the agenda would identify on the agenda, go to page 10 for, the mitigation plan, and go to page 15 for addendum 1 to the mitigation plan, and look at page 320 for the exhibit showing the wildfire map, and look at, page such and such, so that we have some kind of an outline, so we're not wasting time scrolling through 600 pages. It's undoable. It's ridiculous. So that's the only comment I have, is that the materials themselves are lengthy, but they're not presented well in the agenda outline. So it's just haphazard going through it and trying to find what you want. So that's just a suggestion. If we're going to look at this again, sometime it'd be good if it's broken out. But I appreciate all the work and the update.
Councilor Wolf, I think that's a really good point. I think in general, the guidance there would be if we could make it sort of digestible for members of council, so that we could get a reasonable perception of what we really need to know within a realistic amount of time. I think your point is very good. So we'll work towards that in the future to have something a little more bite-sized and nonetheless good.
Yeah, if I could add too, I can help Karen within 24 hours and provide some key focused areas in the page numbers for you to review. If you'd like, Karen, I can work with you on that, and you can push it to them. It's up to you.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's a great suggestion.
Okay.
Good, thank you. I believe Mayor Pro Tem had her hand up.
Thanks. First of all, Mike, you said it was, data rich, and I did find when I was scanning through it, it's very informative. I learned a lot, and you can go in and just find things to go educate yourself and get a lot smarter really quickly on specific items. So that was really nice. And I would just like to clarify with Karen that the only commitment we have as a city in adopting this plan is to continue basically data collection and analysis, but primarily coordination and communication. There's no other commitment as a city for us to adopt this. Am I correct in that
That's correct, yes. And I
Okay.
would say tracking our completed actions that are listed in this plan.
Okay, I gotta tell you, it was really, again, it was way too much to absorb, you know, but that which I did absorb was good. And what was fascinating to me as I was going through it, and I would raise, I would have a question and then I just go a little bit further and my question would be answered. So that was really nice as well. My last question is, and I didn't necessarily look for this, but was Fountain Creek Watershed District coordinated with in terms of flood risk for Fountain Creek and the watershed?
Yes, they were in the initial stages. They were part of the, yep, they were coordinated.
Great. Okay, that's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. We have other questions from council? Councilor Chandler, please.
So I agree with Mayor Pro Tem Fortune, very data rich, but I'm a data nerd and I thought it was fascinating. I did focus on the section on Manitou, which I appreciated that the municipalities were separated. I have a question for Karen, and this isn't necessarily a hazard mitigation question, more than one of the data points that I thought was fascinating was in a table 3.5 on page 39. I realize this is 2018 data, but something that jumped out at me unique to Manitou Springs was the percentage of families and individuals below the poverty level is high, quite a bit higher than the other municipalities. And I'm just wondering from a local municipal standpoint, if, for example, we were to have to evacuate, do we take that into consideration, our population? For example, if we have a population that lacks adequate transportation or something like that, do we, because you put it in the packet and it jumped out on me, I'm just wondering, and it's unique to Manitou in the other municipalities, if we take those kinds of things into consideration should a catastrophic event occur?
Well, we do address that. I believe that we have an action that addresses communication with vulnerable populations.
Okay.
We often think about that as elderly, maybe non-English speaking. But this is certainly something, I think it's addressed through our emergency operations plan, but I could certainly follow up on that. And you're correct about the poverty level.
Yes. Okay. So we do, but there is a plan in place for our particular unique population variance.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
Okay.
There is another aspect of this that I recall from working with Chief Ribeiro is that often residents don't want to self-identify as somebody who needs assistance in an emergency, that can be a challenge. And that's one of the stumbling blocks to having a really comprehensive effort.
Good point. Okay, thank you. I'd be interested in that information at some point. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good point. Thank you. Other council members, do you have questions? Okay, I don't see any hands going up. Good. Well, yes, there's a lot of information there, 550 pages. I think it was well crafted and well thought out. It's a lot to swallow in one or several sittings, but we're glad that you guys keep working on it day in and day out throughout the year. So that gives us a good measure of comfort. If there are no other questions, I would propose that we thank our visitors, Mike, Jim, Lonnie, and of course, Karen. Thank you for the work you've done and the time you've spent with us tonight. If we have follow-on questions, we'll email them to you or through Karen, and she can chase down an answer with you all. So thank you very much. You all have a good evening, okay?
Thank you all very much.
Cheers. Thank you. Okay. All right. So we will now move on to our second item. That's a discussion of the Hiawatha Gardens by the Task Force 3. It's their update to City Council. And I believe we have Crystal Abeta and Laura Newman tonight to present. So Judy, if you could bring them over. Okay. Okay. Good evening, Crystal. Hi, Laura.
Good evening.
Okay, good evening. So who's going to start off?
That would be me.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor Graham, and good evening, City Council. My name is Crystal Abeda. My official title with the city is Grant Administrator, but I am the staff liaison to the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force Work Group. I've been with the city for a little over 4 years, but haven't got much face time in front of council. So I may look new, but I have been with the city for quite some time. Tonight, I'm here to give council an update on the progress of the task force for the Hiawatha Gardens project. We do have a PowerPoint presentation prepared. I guess I'm not clear if I'm supposed to bring that up or if Judy will.
What page are you on, please?
It's page 557, Julie.
Thank you.
Do you have it open already, Crystal? Do you have it available, or do you want me to go ahead and pull it from the?
I do have it open.
Okay. So you should be able to just open that up and then do the share screen.
Okay.
That green. And then once you select the right screen to share, then just hit share.
Okay. As stated, I'm here tonight to give an update to council about the progress so far with the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force. Pursuant to the resolution that was passed on October 20th of 2020, Resolution 3120.
Crystal, is everybody else seeing the screen? I'm just got a black screen. Does everybody else?
Okay.
I think, Judy, could you just pull it up? I think it might be easier if you just pull it up and we go from there.
Okay, I'll do that.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll
Sorry
just,
about that.
nope, this is fine, but I just didn't want you to keep going and the screen was black. So we'll go from there. Thank you.
It's taking a while to load here. It's a big packet. Tell me again that page it was on. It was like 5 something.
557 was when the briefing itself started, the PowerPoint started.
Mayor, could we just take a 5-minute break and we'll try to get everything loaded? That way people aren't just sitting here. We could take a quick 5-minute break, get it uploaded and go from
I
there.
got it pulled up.
Oh, you do? Okay.
I just have to get it so it's the right size here.
Okay, that's much better.
Okay. I appreciate that, Judy.
Yeah.
What's a meeting without a few technical difficulties here?
It's just very sluggish because it's got the whole packet here.
Okay. As we all know, Hiawatha Gardens is a special place to Manitou and has been a part of our community for well over 100 years. Recently, we have been working on the future of Hiawatha Gardens and the site that it sits on. We started this endeavor back in 2016 when we purchased the building for a little over $1 million. Since that purchase, there have been many thoughts and ideas on the development of the site. I would like to focus in on the structures that reside at Hiawatha Gardens. So tonight we are going to zoom in, excuse the pun, but we are going to be concentrating on the buildings and leave some of the other surrounding subjects at the door. This building, as mentioned, was purchased in 2016. It was purchased with PPRTA funding. And as such, we must do as promised and use the Hiawatha Gardens, the use of Hiawatha Gardens must remain directly tied to transportation. On October 20th, Council passed a resolution for the retention of historically significant sections of Hiawatha Gardens to be retained for future use as a transportation center and community hub. One of the first action items in that resolution was to reconvene the task force. The task force is a working group that helps sort out some of the complexities of this project. The task force agreed that they would carry the official title of Task Force 3. And they have come together and defined their role as focusing on the future of the building, both short-term and long-term, but they agree as a task force that they are not focused on the parking issues that lie at that site, but rather those are the responsibilities under the TMMP. Next slide. Thank you, Judy. I've already touched on the background of why we're here today. Last year in October, City Council adopted Resolution 3120, directing that we investigate and implement the restoration of historic aspects of Hiawatha Gardens with the goal to establish it for community use, including but not limited to a multimodal transportation hub. In order to get us to that goal, there were some action items that were laid out. And some of those top level action items were to assign a city staff project manager, which has been done. Investigate avenues to make sure that Hiawatha Gardens is self-sustaining, and for the task force to initiate and develop a feasible plan that will be completed in the next 9 months. We'll also be initiating discussions with the COG for the monetary value that is outlined in their agreement. And then we will also make sure that Hiawatha Gardens is considered for nomination to be submitted back into the historic district. Next slide. The task force has been meeting frequently and regularly. 2 members with critical expertise have been added, Ellen Delowich and Bill Kerner. A communication tool has been developed to address community concerns, which is included in tonight's packet. The task force has also been able to solicit the opinion of a second professional to provide structural and historical analysis for all of the buildings that make up Hiawatha Gardens. Next slide. Thank you, Judy.
Sure.
So this is a visual of the building plan for Hiawatha Gardens. The main focus for tonight is going to be structure 1, which we have relabeled as the original dance hall. This is the portion that is historically significant. Structure 2, which is in orange, and then the link, which is in red, are minor influences to that historical significance. Next slide. And we may need to refer back to the building plan as we have more discussion at the end of the presentation. So structural assessments were performed by 3 experts. On that team were Echo Architecture, Cushing Terrell, and then their subcontractor, IMEG, who did another structural assessment. Back in February of 2020, Echo Architecture and their structural engineer, HCDA, came out and performed an assessment of Hiawatha Gardens, and they reported their findings with some preliminary cost estimates that were presented to council on September 29th of last year. That February report indicated that the basement and the second floor of structure 2 were severely compromised. Along with that finding, they also found the southernmost addition was also compromised. In early September of 2020, Echo came back out and did a walkthrough of the site to provide they did that walkthrough to provide an updated cost proposal for a demolition plan. Within that visit, it was revealed that issues found in February were still there. And in fact, those issues became more significant. Also revealed in that walkthrough that they performed in early September was that some joists were cut. And that was presented at the September 29th work session. I want to make a point of clarification here. There was a statement made at the September work session that those joists were cut during the abatement that was performed in July of 2019. And that is not accurate. The joists were cut previous to the city buying the building back in 2016. The mitigation work that was performed in July of 2019 only exposed those joists because the drywall was torn back and removed from those areas, exposing those cut joists. Those cut joists were there, we believe, because of nooks that previous owners had in the building. But this is the reason why those cut joists were never a concern before, because they were not revealed until the abatement was complete. So moving on to more current events. In October of 2020, Cushing Terrell and IMEG performed a structural assessment of Hiawatha Gardens and confirmed the findings of Echo Architecture. All the professionals involved concluded that structure 2, the link, and all of the additions are structurally unsound and not economically feasible to save, and are only minor influences to the site of Hiawatha Gardens. Also, through these preliminary assessments, they consider structure 1 to be, and I'm quoting from their reports, but structure 1 is presumed to be in very good or remarkable condition. And they believe this is true because structure 1 has been protected by the other structures for well over 100 years. Okay, next slide. So I want to outline for council the courses of action that the task force considered. We believed there were 3 options to examine. Option 1, which is partial demo. This option includes demolishing structure 2, the link, and all the additions, which, as a reminder, have very little historic significance. They have historic influence, but not significance. We also considered what we're labeling option 2, which is full demo of all of the structures at Hiawatha Gardens. And then option 3. So option 3 requires a little more explanation here, but it includes all of the demolition of option 1, plus once the original dance hall is exposed, a structural assessment would immediately occur to confirm its structural condition. If the condition of the original dance hall is not confirmed as expected, the already deployed demolition team will be directed to take down the original dance hall. Next slide, please. So now we're going to go through the various options in a little bit more depth. Option 1 is the partial demolition option that preserves the original dance hall. The pros of this approach is that we take a methodical and incremental approach that allows us to assess the original dance hall structure more thoroughly. This approach very much aligns with Plan Manitou and the goals in the long-term section of that plan. And the majority of the community supports retaining historically significant portions of Hiawatha Gardens. The drawbacks to this option is that it may take more time and it may take more money, but the time and the money will only be additional if the original structure, if the original dance hall structure is found to have issues. Next slide, please.
Are we allowed to ask questions along the way, or do you prefer we wait till the end?
I would prefer that we wait till the end.
I would also, so if we could go ahead and get through the slides, but we, council members, if you could make notes as we go through, I think that would be a good thing. So
Thank you.
Crystal, back to you.
Okay, so next slide, option 2. Oh, we went a little too far. It's the gray colored option. Yep.
I'm sorry. Got such a delay here. There we go.
Option 2 is the full demo option. This is obviously the quickest option, and it leaves the site as a blank slate. But the blank slate could also be seen as a con, because without any infrastructure, we are completely starting from scratch. This option also does not align with the values that we have laid out in Plan Manitou. And it also eliminates the possibility of retaining an existing structure that could be used for the future use of the site. Okay, so now that brings us to option 3, which is the next slide. Option 3, this is partial demo, a continuation of option 1 if needed. Again, this will only be implemented if needed. The first phase of this is going to be in option 1. It's going to be the partial demo of structure 2, the link, and all the additions. And this will expose the original dance hall, which is also known as Structure 1. At this point, it's the intention that the demolition would take a pause. We would have some structural experts that would come out and confirm the condition of the original dance hall structure. If the condition of the original dance hall is not economically feasible to save, the demolition crew would be on site and they could proceed with demo, or they could also proceed with preservation of the original dance hall, which would include shoring up walls, foundation, and then waterproofing the entire structure. This option we don't expect is likely. We did include it in here because it's possible, but all of our experts have found through their preliminary evaluations that the original dance hall is in good condition. Okay, next slide, which is the demo options cost. This I'm sure is what everybody's holding their breath to see. I wanna just preface that the option costs that are laid out here are based on estimates only. We will solidify these costs through an upcoming RFP process. So I'm just gonna go column by column here. Option 1 for partial demolition. Again, this is for removal of structure 2, the link, and the additions, and this option preserves the original dance hall. Demolition costs are in the ballpark of $84,000. Option 2, full demo. This would be what some call leveling all buildings, is $131,000. And then option 3, which is a continuation of option 1, this would only be an option if the condition of the original structure, or the original dance hall structure, is found to be unfavorable. And we would continue on with the demolition of the original dance hall at a price tag of $60,000. So if we want to try to compare these options, I'm going to go ahead and combine some of these numbers for you. The cost of option number 1 combined with the cost of option number 3, which would bring us to the final end result of demolishing all structures at the Hiawatha Gardens site, but it would be the incremental approach, is a total of $144,000 versus $131,000 for full demo from the onset. The difference between the two approaches is approximately 10%. I also want to note that shoring up the walls and the foundation, and then additional waterproofing that will be needed for the original dance hall, is not included in the demolition price tags. That is listed separately, and from the figures that we've gotten, that could be up to $94,000. Okay, I think we're ready for the next slide, our immediate next steps. So in summary, that brings us to how do we make some forward progress, and how do we do that quickly? The task force supports an iterative process to ensure that the city pursues an economically feasible project without compromising our community values. It is our recommendation, under the direction of the task force, that city staff should issue an RFP to implement option 1, which is the partial demo of the non-historic significant portions of Hiawatha Gardens. This option preserves the original dance hall for potential restoration. In that RFP, we will also be putting the option for number 3 to ensure that any selected contractor would be able to fulfill that requirement, that they could pause their work, wait for us to go through the structural confirmation process, and then re-engage with either protection of the original dance hall or continued demolition. Also, in conjunction with the demolition RFP, there are costs related to site drainage and issues with the creek that will need to be addressed, regardless of whether or not a structure is left standing at the Hiawatha Gardens site. And it is our plan with these immediate next steps to issue that RFP as well. Okay, next slide. Depending on the direction we take with demolition, there are many considerations to plan for as we move forward to developing the Hiawatha Gardens site into something that our community can use and be proud of. This slide is here to illustrate the different decision points that we think are needed, depending on what stays standing and what may possibly go there at the Hiawatha Gardens site. Okay, next slide. And this is where I would open it up for discussion and guidance and any questions that council may have about our proposed recommendation.
Okay, Council, yes, I think this now begins our question and answer period. Maybe we want to leave the presentation up there a little bit so we have things to refer to. And of course, be aware that I can only see a few people at a time. So if there's a council member who has questions or comments, if you could raise your hand, and then give your name, please, too, so I can hear you.
I have a minor question. This is Julie.
Oh, Julie. Okay, Julie. Yeah, okay. Councilor Wolf, please.
Yeah, thank you. What did it mean on page 64 when it said 564, when it said one of the cons is it'll take longer and it'll cost more? Take longer than what and cost more than what? I didn't quite get that.
Okay, I believe that's under option 1, the partial demo option that preserves the original dance hall. Because it's, I think we're talking long-term. When we're thinking after demolition, we're gonna have a building still standing and there are gonna be lots of decisions surrounding that. And so the process after demo will take longer.
It'll take longer than if we do a complete demo, or it'll take longer than if we do one of the other options, or it'll take longer than what?
That's correct, Julie. It's it'll take longer than if we just go in and fully demolish the site from the onset.
Oh, okay. So then the second comment under cons, then that just means option 1 costs more than option 2. Is that what it means?
It will only cost more if we proceed with option 3.
Okay. Okay, I understand now. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Did you have other questions also?
No, I'm good. Thanks, John.
Good for now. Okay, sure. Okay, other council members. Gosh, we're bashful tonight. This is unusual. Gosh,
Mr.
I
Mayor.
guess I'll just call and ask everybody, give everybody an opportunity. Mr. Shada, do you have thoughts at the moment? Questions?
So I guess the bottom line here is that $13,000 is sort of our opportunity cost to see whether the dance hall is viable, plus about $100,000 to secure the building if it is left standing. Is that correct, Crystal?
That is correct.
Okay, so basically for about $113,000, we have the opportunity to have about a 7,400 square foot building. Okay, that we have some options to do something with.
Exactly correct.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Crystal, if I could follow up on that, I believe in one of the supporting documents, there was an estimate of the cost to go beyond, I guess, basic stabilization to kind of a more, I guess, enhanced stabilization, not quite ready for use because the use hasn't been defined, but I think that was about $80 a square foot. Is that correct?
I guess I'm not quite understanding the question.
Yeah. Okay. So I remember you're looking at one of the supporting documents. It seemed like there was a price tag of about $600,000. Assuming structure one, was to be salvaged. I guess on top of the numbers you just showed us, the cost to demolish everything but structure one plus stabilizing, waterproofing, and about $94,000. Then I think on top of that, we would be looking at, there's an estimated cost there of about $600,000 or about $80 a square foot. I see Laura's nodding her head there. So maybe Laura, you could weigh in here. I'm just trying to get an idea of the overall cost that we're looking at. Laura?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Graham. Both firms mentioned an approximate cost for the building to be usable in some fashion at about $600,000. Now, there are amenities that would be required for the public to be able to use the building, in particular restrooms, which we have a ballpark estimate as well. But the recommendation by the two firms is that would be a separate building than the historic building. And so in essence, yes, within reason for the walls to work and the electricity and the HVAC, $600,000 is the number to make that site usable.
Okay.
So you're correct doing the math.
Okay, thank you. And I see both Councilor Chandler and Councilor Shada have their hands up. Councilor Chandler, we'll call it your turn and then we'll go to Mr. Shada.
Well, I just wanted to comment that those figures that you quote are in the Cushing-Terrell document. And it does list extensively what would be needed, including electricity and all that stuff, but also bringing the building up to code. Right now, the structure can only hold 40 pounds per square foot and code is 100 pounds per square foot. So those kinds of things were all incorporated in that estimate. But if you're looking for where it is, it's in the Cushing-Terrell document. And if you are perusing that document, I think in their conclusion under options, if you want to read that paragraph, I think they did an awesome job of just summing up what their opinions were with proceeding with option one. Thanks. That's all I have.
Okay, thanks, Judith. John, you had a comment or question?
So I guess hold on here. Basically, what we end up here is a shell of a building, okay, that would cost us, essentially the cost to us is about $16 a square foot. And then if we have to add the guesstimate amenities of reinforcing the floor and doing the stuff to make it basically, structure, useful, that in my calculations, is about an additional $80 a square foot.
Laura, could you respond to that? I think you're not, it looks like you're nodding. I think you're agreeing that Mr. Shada has his numbers right.
Yes, I think Counselor Shada has his numbers correct. And
Okay.
it probably would beg the question, and I don't have the document open in front of me, but I can be looking through it while someone else is talking about whether it would be more efficient to tear down the entire building and build it from scratch. And the firm recommended that the cost to rehabilitate a historic structure that is structurally sound, therefore the recommendation for option one, to make sure we are correct in that assumption, is less expensive than to completely demolish the building and rebuild it at a building at code. And so they did make that. And then there's also the intrinsic value of a historic structure versus non-historic and so forth, but I won't get into that necessarily. I'll just compare apples to apples.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Laura.
And I would also just add to that, reminding council that if this does get put back in the historic district, or it is deemed, well, I'll just leave it at that. If it's put back in the historic district, we bypass the floodplain restrictions that would add to the cost of construction for a new building. So we have to weigh that in the equation as well.
Good point, Crystal.
Thank you. Mr. Shada?
Yeah, I want to ask a question. So if we completely remove all the buildings here, don't we have a floodplain issue in terms of putting anything back there?
Exactly.
Okay. So by basically, leaving kind of the grandfathered footprint of the building there, okay, that heads off a whole big floodplain issue. Should we want to put anything back there? Let's see, what else was my other question? I guess, does anybody just roughly know what sort of a do we have any ideas about, I realize that if we remove the entire footprint and started from scratch, that may not be what we would want to put back there. But does anybody have any rough ideas in terms of what kind of cost per square footage would be of putting any kind of a structure back on that in terms of what the market is? Does anybody have any rough numbers?
In one of the reports, and I don't know if Counselor Chandler has it open, there was a price per square footage, but it does not specifically answer about the floodplain. It was just an apples comparison about rehabilitating a historical building and building it anew. But I will be looking at the same time if I could have just a minute to answer that question.
Okay, thank you very much.
If I could add to that one thing, Mayor.
Yeah, Counselor Chandler, please.
So the cost of rehabilitating the building, the floodplain notwithstanding, which is huge, putting it back in the historic district, just to give people something to think about, would open up potentially a number of grants and other financial funding as well for preservation of the historic district that preservation of the historical structure that we would not have if we started from scratch. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Shada?
Yes, maybe somebody on city staff or maybe somebody here knows, what is the approximate square footage of the big hall that is now remaining in City Hall?
See,
Is that Memorial Hall?
Yeah, Memorial Hall, I'm sorry, yeah.
Let me see if Jeff is on. He may know it right off the top of his head. I can't remember exactly the square footage.
I know we've been kind of,
Yeah,
eating into it. And so I'm just wondering if we have a rough idea.
I have it under something, but let's bring Jeff Jones over and see if he has it. I can look through some of my emails. I have it. I don't remember on top of my head, but can we bring Jeff Jones over and see if he knows that?
And while that's going on, I would just like to mention, that I was brought on to the city to help with flood recovery. And I can tell you from my experience with helping the city with flood recovery, the time it takes to get through the floodplain requirements is very extensive. So if we choose to go that route, there's a lot of time that we should tack on to until we get to a final product because of that requirement.
Jeff, do you know the square footage of just the Memorial Hall? I'm looking through my COVID-19 file. I know we looked at it during this time, but do you know what it is?
No, I just heard Mr. Shada mention that, and I started looking through the layout of the footprint that when we were talking about possible remodeling, and I'm looking through it right now. As soon as I find it, if I don't find it for this meeting, I can definitely get it to Mr. Shada and to the council, exactly what it is. I can't remember right off the top of my head.
I can't either. Let me keep looking through my files.
I guess I have one other quick question.
Hey, John.
Is the existing space that in the main hall of City Hall, is that up to snuff from the standpoint of
Code.
£4 per square foot?
Is that up to snuff in what? I'm sorry, Mr. Shada, what did you
Well,
ask?
we were comparing one of the costs of Hiawatha that it needed to be brought up to, have improvements of, $600,000. And one of the things that I think Councilwoman Chandler brought up was that, the flooring was only able to withstand 40 pounds a square foot and the code required 100. I was just asking, have we had City Hall evaluated from that standpoint?
I don't know if it's been evaluated by the how much you can do per square foot. We can look at that, but it has been evaluated on other aspects, and we're not up to code on many things, but we're grandfathered in.
Right. Well, I guess what I'm just trying to figure out here is sort of kind of alternatives in terms of, I'm just looking at that, the opportunity of essentially 74,000 square feet of space. Okay. And, I have a kind of an overall gut feeling that it's sort of like that probably City Hall overall, in terms of remodeling certain square footage in it, is about the same as Hiawatha. To me, my gut feel is they're almost kind of the same era of a building.
So I quickly glanced at the assessment that Cushing Terrell did for all of our facilities and parks, and their presentation is coming up after this one. But they came out and measured, and for Memorial Hall, they are saying that the total square footage is 13,789 thousand square feet. So 13,789. Obviously, that includes more than just Memorial Hall, but I don't know if that provides some additional perspective.
Thank you.
Crystal. Okay, well, while Laura and Jeff are doing some research there, do we have other questions that we could entertain? Council members? Okay. We could take a short break and give them an opportunity to do a little more research, if that sounds reasonable. Would everybody be okay with a 10-minute break?
Thank you.
Could I
Mayor,
ask Crystal? I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor. Could I ask Crystal, what was that number you came up with from Cushing Terrell?
The total square footage that they measured for the first floor of Memorial Hall, or I'm sorry, not Memorial Hall, for City Hall, is 13,789 square feet.
So that's the entire first floor.
That's the entire one, yeah.
Right.
So I'm going to add, they've got a layout that they had done. So I'm going to add up a few numbers. I can give you a pretty close ballpark figure here when we come back to it.
Okay.
so let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break.
Can I just ask everybody to mute when they take a break? Make sure you mute your microphone, please.
Right, so let's just say rough numbers, let's say 7:25, we'll be back. Okay, 7:25.
That you pulled together, and then we can go from there.
Well, the fire department Randy, Captain Randy said it was 4,030 square feet. That probably doesn't include the kitchen area or the closet area though.
That's just Memorial Hall, right? Just where
Correct.
people can sit.
Yes.
So if you include the kitchen and others, you're probably looking at about 5,200 square feet. And then Laura, do you want to talk a little bit about what you found?
Yes, and my information is not embedded in one of the reports that Echo did, at least Echo's recent reports. It could be back in 2018 or Cushing Terrell. However, I did find emails that I had with both of them and talked to a couple of individuals on the phone. And they said that we can feel confident and conservative in using $125 to $140 per square foot to build a new commercial building. They did not make the comment about the floodplain, other than that would be additional. And as I understand it, we have some guest speakers coming up with the next presentation that may be able to verify those numbers if it's important. And also I'm happy to do some verification with Crystal too and get back to council with some formal numbers as well.
Thank you, Laura. And Mr. Shada, what was the number you had? You had $80 a square foot plus something else. What was that?
You know, Mayor Graham, I'm rechecking my numbers again. All right.
Okay, well, when you get the numbers, could you raise your hand? I think we'd all like to know. Yeah, but go ahead and do the math and let us know.
Okay.
Meanwhile, Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the task force has it on their agenda to work through a lot of these comparison costs. So I'm not sure the total value added to doing all that work tonight. It was really to just inform council of that the intent is to put out an RFP to do the demolishing as laid out in Crystal's briefing. So I don't know that we need to get a lot more into the weeds on it or not as a council at this point in time.
And when we are at the point of awarding a contract, that will come back in front of City Council for approval.
Council members, do you have other questions for Crystal or for Laura? Okay, I've got a comment. I think going forward and in looking at some of the supporting material that the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force prepared, it looks like the intent is to have a little more public engagement, some public meetings to give members of the public a chance to ask questions and answer questions. You know, in the age of COVID, things have necessarily been, you know, remote, and I guess it's going to be that way for a while, but it's also, I think, cut down on the public's ability to interact with government, with boards and commissions. So I guess, Laura, you're the appropriate person to ask. Do you foresee some additional public meetings?
And I'm a supporting player to Crystal, but I'm happy to answer on her behalf. How's that?
Well, no, that's okay. I mean, and I think probably Denise has a thought on this too. So Crystal, maybe I should ask that question of you.
Well, as already mentioned, these are future agenda items for our task force. I think where Laura comes in as a good resource is that she can explain to this group the public engagement that we have already done. And I think it is the intent of the task force to keep on that train and maybe even, you know, add more engagement as we get further along in this process. You know, Laura has a ton of historical information about, you know, the different iterations of these task force and the challenges that we have faced with the complexities of this site and, you know, with the public engagement piece. So it is the full intent of the task force to engage the public when the time is appropriate.
I also want to mention, I have both the library and Hiawatha, we're going to put Alex on to make sure that we're sharing information on a regular basis. And he'll be doing a communication plans for both of them because they're both city buildings. And we need to make sure that both buildings, that the community knows and that we're being consistent in what both is sharing and how we're getting the word out. So that will be the other thing that we will be working on. And Laura, you may want to mention, or I can mention, right now, it really is about what part are they going to demolish, right? They're going to do this. What the purpose of that building is still needs to be discussed. And that's going to take a lot of public communication and public involvement as we move forward. So there will be lots of opportunities still to come up.
I think there's also the, I'm sorry, Councillor Chandler, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say along the lines of the public engagement. So if we proceed with option 1 and we uncover the dance hall and it is not structurally sound, it will need to be demolished. So the community engagement will happen after the ground is level, and we'll find out what we want to do with the site. If it looks like the dance hall can be preserved, then that's where the money will be invested to secure the building and wrap it. So then the community can decide what with their input will be so important with what the future use of the building will be.
Okay, and I guess that brings up the question of the money, where the money comes from. We have some PPRTA money that we can use, but really, I think when we start looking at costs now that are, approaching well, $600,000 plus some demo costs, and then the $94,000 I think for stabilization, we're at about $800,000, and my understanding that would be for a shell of a building. So I guess there's a question: where does all that money come from? We have some, but I don't think we have anywhere near $800,000. In the slides, we see that there's reference to pursuing grants, public-private partnerships, stuff like that. But that's not the same as having money in the bank. We still have some pretty severe obstacles to cross to get the money, I think.
And I, if I could, Mayor.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead, please, Laura. Yeah.
When the resolution was passed in October, having the building be economically sustainable was one of the portions of the resolution, and you gave us a 9-month window to do so. And so this is the first step. The demo is the first step, 4 months in, but is a parallel to, while we're working on that and sending the RFP out and then choosing a firm and going through the demo, is to investigate exactly what you're saying so that we can come back to council with a variety of recommendations about how to fund whatever the building may become. And we're very cognizant of that 9-month window. We'd like to get it done sooner versus later, but there's only 5 months left. So we're going to be doing a lot of work in the weeks ahead.
Okay. All right, understand. So conceivably, we could get to a point where if structure 1 was presumably salvageable, we'd have knocked down everything else, and we would put in about $94,000, I think, to stabilize the building, and then it's in a sort of a mothballed state, I guess, as well. We figure out what to do with it and where to get the money. Is that a fair assessment of the situation?
And I'd like to think that it's not mothballed that long, because we've done a lot of work in parallel to the demo process, so that we have some recommendations, not only about the future of the building through some community engagement, but also where the money could come from. And on that slide that Crystal presented, and by the way, she did a fantastic job, I think, there was a little section on the financials that said the balance of PPRTA is a little over $220,000. So we do have those monies available to get through this next step and have a few remaining dollars to potentially even do some aesthetic upgrades to the site when the COG reopens in the spring and so forth, but I'm getting ahead of myself. So those are the monies we have available, and you have charged us with finding where the other monies will come from, and we're going to come back with recommendations.
Thank you. I believe Councillor Butner, was next, and then Councillor Wolf.
So I think I saw in the briefing, the COG was committed to $500,000. Is that correct?
Yes, and I interpreted And I'd like agreement from everyone that that was the starting point, is $500,000. That was not the topping off number, although we have not engaged in conversations, our task force. That was for city staff to pursue those conversations, but.
So regarding the COG, I was looking at the news today and I saw that they're going to run a train every 40 minutes. And I recall when I was first brought on to council, that I mentioned the fact that I talked to the parking lot attendant and he told me that they're going to be running a train every 45 minutes. And I was basically told, no, you're wrong. Well, now it's come out on the news that they're going to be running a train every 40 minutes. So I think it's pertinent that they have some sort of a situation where they can have a shuttle or something or some hub to manage that, because having cars come in and out of that parking lot at the rate of a train running every 40 minutes is not possible. It's not feasible in that small canyon. Right before 2 years ago when the COG was running, they ran a train every 1 hour and 15 minutes. So if they're proposing to do a train every 40 minutes, that parking lot can't handle it. So I think it's imperative that they step forward with a plan to manage their traffic. And I think it's going to require a transportation hub. So they might have to come forward with more than $500,000 for that location.
Okay.
And
Thank you, Mr. Bremner. With Councillor Wolf is next.
Thank you. Just to Steve Bremner's point, since we've already given the COG the conditional use permit that they wanted, and we agreed not to require them to do anything particular about traffic and parking problems, because the only thing they have to do is meet with us once a year. We can ask them to do whatever, but we don't have any leverage, as far as I can tell, because that train's already left the station, no pun intended. So that was why, Steve, I was hoping you would vote with me to require some kind of parking and traffic plan, but you voted just to allow them to just exercise good faith. So I hope that works out well.
That wasn't me. I was not part of that at all. I was not on council at that time.
Oh, you weren't on council at that time? Oh, I'm very sorry then. You missed it. But that was a discussion when we were trying to decide about the COG, and it was in Memorial Hall because there was a lot of people there. And ultimately the vote was that the COG is required to have a meeting once a year with Manitou so that we can chat. And that's the only thing. So this business about 500 minimum, 250 minimum, if you're pulling that out of the contract, I'd like to look at that language, because my recollection of that contract was that it was not mandatory. It was, we assume and hope and plan that probably with good faith and good luck that this will be happening. It wasn't like a mandatory thing. So I'd be curious to look at that language. And my only other comment was that I think it's helpful to consider, if we're going to say, oh no, there might not be enough money, we could consider URA money toward this. So that was just my only other comment. And if we can finally get it together to eventually have a true reservation system so that people can reserve a parking spot in that lot and pay in advance and all of that, then we could generate a lot of money from that to help reimburse us for the expenses of the building. So those are just my little comments on the money, the costs involved.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Wolf. I believe that we wouldn't be able to use the URA money since the Hiawatha Gardens area is outside the URA territory.
Yeah, but on the other hand, they took what, 2 million or $1.5 million that we took back under the Jure administration, and last year we took 1.4 million back. So we apparently have the authority to take the money back. So I'm not sure that that technicality is such a big deal, because we're not spending the 1.4 million on the URA neighborhood either. It's in the general budget, even though I think we're giving half of it back. So that's just possibilities of where we can get money.
All right, thank you. Mr. Shade, I think you've got an answer for us.
Yes, sir. Okay, first off, what I'd like to kind of observe is on page 567, which is all the costs that staff put together for us. I guess I'd kind of like to observe that either way here, okay, essentially $131,000 is just sort of kind of, maybe I'm not using the right financial term, but it's just sort of kind of a sunk cost. In other words, either way we go, that's $131,000 we have to spend. And either we spend it and we remove the entire site, or we spend another $23,000 and we have something. Okay, all right. So, you know, in that decision tree there, the only other way not to spend $131,000 is just to do what we're doing right now. Okay, not spend anything and hope the thing, you know, just gets washed out in a flood or burns down or just sits there, you know, like it is. So in a sense, when we look at that thing there, it's $23,000 for us to have the opportunity for 7,400 square feet. Then doing the numbers, John, you asked me, so I brought up a spreadsheet quick here. And basically, essentially, if I change that number here to, because I convinced myself that that's true, essentially we end up with a building for about $3 a square foot. Okay, all right. Then we can choose to spend $81 a square foot for this $600,000 something. Okay, so for $84 a square foot, okay, we have a pretty significant size building. And then if the numbers from Laura and whatnot are correct, if we had to do something and from Mr. Jones from scratch, okay, at $140 a square foot, that's a little bit more than $1 million. So essentially, you know, this is sort of kind of what's persuading me in the whole argument is that it seems like to me, just financially, it seems like we have a lot of options. It seems like to me, we continue to have a need. We know, I think what we're going to find, you know, when we look at all this facility stuff, we keep eating into the main hall of City Hall. Okay, we continually do that. We have people who have an office almost in, you know, just little tiny rooms. The police department is just ridiculous in terms of the size of it. Okay, and it seems like to me that retaining this building and the options for it for a larger space, okay, with adjacent parking is some options that we just can't afford not to consider. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you, John. Other council members, do you have comments?
Just
Councilor Chandler.
a quick add-on to that, Councilor Shada, that the $140 per square foot is not considering the significant cost of the floodplain issue, making that quite a bit more. So, so just something to think about. It would be quite a bit more than the 140, probably a square foot. So, thank you for that analysis, though. I appreciate it.
Good, thank you. I guess one of the things we need to realize, the clock is ticking. Whatever, I mean, it looks like there's consensus to tear down, you know, a good portion of the building. I mean, there are some people that would like to take the whole thing down and some who are, you know, at this point, the iterative approach where we take some of it down. But I guess the question is we need to get something done and stable by, I'm thinking the beginning of May, so that we have things in place by tourist season. So we're not trying to, you know, do construction then. So I don't want to push this, this business. I don't want to kick the can down the road too far. You know, I've been one who's been very skeptical of saving the building. You know, I think at one time at a meeting, I did say that I thought the building should be bulldozed. I'm certainly willing to take this more iterative approach. I think the task force has done a good job of identifying the real strengths or potential strengths of the building versus things that we don't need to argue about. I guess personally, I'd be okay with going ahead and issuing the RFP, knocking down, with the intent of taking down everything but structure one. I do think there's more public comment out there to be had. I've had people stop me at various places. I mean, yesterday I was at the dentist, and my dentist who lives in Manitou asked me about the Hiawatha Gardens, and she was fairly unsupportive of saving the building. So there's certainly some comment out there to be had. I don't want to negate that on either side. I think we could go ahead and push forward and get some things done here, move this process along. So that's kind of my 2 cents. Anyone else?
Could we have a show of hands of that for that approach, Mayor? Would that be appropriate?
I think it would be. So I guess to restate, this is basically, I think, what the Hiawatha Gardens Task Force is asking for, that we go ahead and direct staff to go ahead and get an RFP to do the demolition, to go ahead with option one. Is that a correct, Mayor Pro Tem, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, definitely. I just wanted to add that, as was stated by Crystal, the staff intends to send out the RFP because then we'll get much more accurate costing data. So we'll have to come back to council for approval regardless. So we have yet another opportunity to go through this entire discussion if we so choose.
Right. Okay. Good point. And I would like to see, like the public to have an opportunity to ask questions, to interact. Maybe we should have a public meeting or two, not necessarily with the city council meeting, but just something where the public could get involved and voice their concerns.
And I think the task force definitely will take that on with absolutely no argument.
Okay, so, well, that would be my proposal, which is, well, it's really not mine. It's what Hiawatha Gardens asked for. But so I guess I'll ask for a show of hands from council. Who's in favor of that? If you raise your hand. Okay. 5, okay. All opposed? Okay. Mr. Bremner and Steve, do you have comments on that?
Well, I've toured the building. I've seen its foundations, and I don't think it's feasible to retain it. So.
No, and I understand that, certainly. Councilor Wolf, you had a comment?
Oh, thank you. I actually wanted to see if I could have just a little discussion for a moment with Steve. So Steve, if we assume that City Hall, that our staff don't have enough space, and that City Hall, there's been discussion for a couple of years now about what to do about the fact that there's not enough space for staff, and some of the staff, their offices are like closets. If we use Memorial Hall in that building for staff so that we really have the police and everybody has space to do their work and they're in a pleasant, hopefully pleasant work environment, then we would need still to have someplace else to replace what is now Memorial Hall for when we have big meetings, 100 people coming to a gathering or coming to a city council meeting, or even to rent out for special events. If we can't do that at Hiawatha, would you propose that we just build another building somewhere, or what do we do? Or do you think it's better to have no hall for gatherings, or do you think it's better not to expand the staff space? How do we manage it if we don't use Hiawatha?
Well, all those questions you're asking me have the assumption that the building is viable.
Yeah.
I just said that I don't think the building is viable. So I would propose to raise the building and build something new.
Oh, can you build something new in a floodplain? I thought that was prohibited. Did I misunderstand that?
Oh, okay.
Where would
So
you build
you're
it?
proposing to take the building that's in the floodplain, that's that's pretty rickety. I mean, I've toured it, I've seen it.
I
And don't
understand
think
that
would
part.
want- I would not want to have an office in that building. But you're proposing to take that building that's in the floodplain and somehow renovate it and make it livable for people to have offices in. Okay, that's fine. That's
No,
your-
I'm not saying that at all, Steve. I'm sorry. I think the offices should go in City Hall and Memorial Hall, you know, where there's the Memorial Hall, the big room that's empty all the time.
Mhm.
And, you know, it has a little kitchen in the back. If that's used for office space for our police and our other staff members, then I'm suggesting we would need another community space. And I don't think it could be built with the brand new building unless I misunderstood what I've learned tonight. I thought if you raise it, you can't build a brand new building there because of the floodplain issues.
You
Did I
can
miss-
build one, Julie, you just can't, it just would cost substantially more to put all the precautions in for floodplain. And I would add that that building 1 has been there for over 100 years, or just 100 years, over 100 years. And it is, according to the 3 different experts, it's in remarkably good condition. So the flooding, Fountain Creek has not really impacted it very much.
Thank you. Anyway, that was just, it wasn't like, I just was trying to have a little conversation, like a normal conversation for a second, because I didn't know if Steve had other ideas on what should we do, because we have to give these staff more space, which means we're going to have little to no space for community meetings. I mean, do we, buy up one of the hotels, the motels down the street and build a brand new thing there? Like, where are we going to go? I just thought it would be convenient because these 2 buildings are so close to each other. Anyway, that's just food for thought. I'm done.
And I guess I would like to add that I still remain pretty skeptical on the, on the building. But I guess this is right now we have a common direction, I guess, insofar as we can take down the part that we're not contesting. I'll try to meet the Hiawatha Gardens people halfway. I am pretty curious about the process for when the evaluation comes for the structure one. So I would like to hear more about that. I think we've got a little bit of time to do that. I really don't want to get in a situation here where we have a building that's potentially mothballed for some horrible amount of time. We can't do anything with it. We've kind of sent this message to the world that when they come to the Hiawatha Gardens, they see those old porta potties in this derelict building, and we try to say, "Welcome to beautiful Manitou Springs."
I
It's
know.
like, well, it's more like "Welcome to the third world." So,
No.
yeah, and I mean, and I really think, and part of the charge, or at least the Hiawatha Gardens in their first slide, or one of the early slides, they said we're not considering parking here. That's they're focused on the building. To me, parking and transportation is a huge issue, and this old building is kind of holding up what we're doing. I think it probably affects the COG's perception of what they want to do with parking. I'm speculating there, but I think the whole thing, there's a lot of things that are intertwined here. So I think we need to get moving and try to get some sort of actionable situation by early May, hopefully before then. Do we have any other comments on this? Okay. Denise, does that, and Laura, Crystal, does that seem like reasonable direction to city staff? Okay. Well, I would propose then, if there's no further discussion, that we move on to our next agenda item. Okay. Crystal, Laura, thank you very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Laura. And I do
Okay.
just want to say this was Crystal's first big presentation to council, and she did a fabulous job. So good job, Crystal.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Much. Okay. So our third item is Parks and Facilities Capital Improvement Plan. Does anybody want to, just a quick break before we get into this? I do see one nod. Okay. 5 minutes or 10 minutes? 5 minute break. Okay. All right. So we'll see you back here just a little after 8 o'clock.
Judy, let's go ahead and pull everybody over while they're on break, just so we have everything set up, ready to go. Don't forget to mute your microphones, please.
Denise and Crystal is leading this one, correct?
Correct. And then we just need to bring over the consultants.
Okay, I've got the list. Thank you.
And John, would you share your spreadsheet with,
Okay, Councilor Wolf's coming back. Okay, I think we're ready to start here. Mr. Shady, could you go ahead and turn your video on, please? Great. Okay.
Mayor, Crystal will
Great.
introduce this and then we'll turn it over to the consultants, but Crystal will be doing the introduction.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. So we're going to hear about our Parks and Facilities Capital Improvement Plan. Crystal, you have the floor. Thank you. You're muted, Crystal.
Thank you. Before I introduce the next agenda item, I just want to thank City Council for approving our recommendation with the last agenda item. I think it's a great step forward for us to finally make some noticeable progress and hopefully invigorate both sides of the Hiawatha Gardens issue. Moving on to this agenda item. In a few moments, I will be introducing our consultant, Cushing Terrell. We have 3 of their members here with us tonight. And they're going to provide council with an update on the Parks and Facilities Capital Improvement Plan project. The purpose of that project is to first identify all city-owned facilities and parks, and then put that collection of data into a centralized place, which, believe it or not, we have not had before. This plan will help us to identify long-term maintenance and replacement needs. From those needs, we will be able to use this as a tool to make smart budgeting decisions that are based from requirements, goals, and resources, and not just a haphazard process that we continue to be entrenched in. The plan will also help city staff to identify sustainability opportunities and ADA upgrades of city-owned facilities and parks that contribute to the quality of life that we have here in Manitou Springs. I think it's important to understand that this tool is a snapshot in time, and then it lays out some benchmarks to use when we're planning for capital improvements. I think we can all agree that over the last several years, Manitou has paid for a lot of plans to be developed. But what has been missing throughout all of these plans is an all-inclusive document that brings together the various elements from those plans and makes it useful. The other gap that we have identified is that we, as I mentioned before, that we don't have a complete list of all of our facilities and parks and all of the corresponding information that goes along with those facilities and parks, such as the size, their age, the amenities in those facilities or those parks, and the age of those amenities. So what we're really trying to establish with this plan is a baseline to know when major maintenance or replacement is needed. To give a little further background on the project, DOLA awarded our city $50,000, and the city provided an equal amount of match for a total project budget of $100,000. In October of 2020, we awarded the project contract to the consulting firm Cushing Terrell through an RFP process. Their team is here tonight to update council on their progress with this plan. It should be noted that in the last few months, we have run into some delays for various reasons, and the timeline is not quite up to date in the PowerPoint that was included in the packet. I do apologize for that. I believe Dave will be outlining some new due dates so that council knows what to expect moving forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Dave Dixon with Cushing Terrell. He will be presenting a quick overview of their work to date. The only other request that I would make is that city council members just hold their questions until after Dave's presentation. We have made time for a Q&A session after he presents his outline. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. It's a fantastic intro. It saves me some time and some things that I don't have to say. So appreciate it. Very happy to meet everyone in the city of Manitou Springs and city council. Excited to introduce ourselves and update you on this 75% draft of the Parks and Facilities Capital Improvements Plan. Man, it sounds like there's a lot of great planning projects going on. I love seeing a city that's kind of getting ahead of it and doing these efforts. And you're interested in this level of long-range planning. So the Hiawatha discussion is a fantastic intro into what we're going to talk about here, and just build upon it, really button up what feels like a really productive night's work. Hopefully everybody can see the cover slide here. I've just got a couple slides. I'm Dave Dixon, co-manager on the Cushing Terrell side, certified urban planner for Cushing Terrell. We're a multidisciplinary A&E firm out of downtown Denver and across the US. We love this kind of stuff because we love multidisciplinary work like this. It's perfectly within our character. But we also got Bob LaPearl, who's a co-manager on the project, and we got Wayne Freeman, who's the principal in charge of the project. So just a few quick kind of high-level slides about what this is all about: the who, what, where, when, why, and how. A little bit on the timeline, and as Crystal said, see if I can answer a few questions at the end. So let's jump right in. So what is the Parks and Facilities Capital Improvements Plan? Well, first of all, as mentioned, it's a tool for staff, for administration, for elected officials, planning commission, everybody, and the public to help make some decisions on what projects to complete, to fund, to build, ultimately. Makes this a little bit easier when you all have it in one place. What is a capital improvement? It might sound kind of goofy, just even what's that? Well, capital improvement project is often a capital intensive project that when completed, it adds value to an asset or property that the city owns, any kind of facility the city owns. This project could be infrastructure, could be roads, equipment, office space, buildings, and anything that city defines as an asset that they own. It's also a snapshot in time. As we just heard, there's a lot of moving parts out there. This is supposed to assess and really be a fact-finding exercise that gathers the best available information into one place. I want to make it abundantly clear that's kind of where we're at today. We just gathered all the facts, we assessed everything, we surveyed things, we brought professionals in where needed to complete this comprehensive assessment of your facilities, buildings, parks, spaces, everything. It identifies deficiencies. It's a kind of a big part of it is where are these facilities not meeting code? Where could they do better? What kind of things need to be done, and then creates a list of projects that would help you get to those benchmarks and those points. Just in general, you probably want to review and update these every 3 to 5 years. Long enough time to where if things change, then you can address those changes. Not 1 year, not 10 years, but something in between, and go through and have a new set of figures and a new set of prioritized projects. It's not exactly a to-do list. In many ways, it implements some of your higher level plans, your plan Manitous and your long range plans. This is a place where all these things can come, all the implementation projects can come together. And it's all well integrated, and it's a really great idea to do these things. It gives you a really good roadmap for prioritizing what some of those improvements are. All right, a little bit about the timeline. We kicked this thing off back in September, late September, with a couple days of site visits with the core team. We took your fantastic city staff took us around to every site that was on our scope. And then in the preceding months, we had a bunch of other site visits where we brought down specialists, engineers, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineers, architects, and others to look at the specific sites. That occurred through September and October. Meanwhile, we did interviews. We interviewed all of the relevant, within our scope. We talked with the relevant department heads and heard directly about specific ideas, needs, areas that have been historically problematic, what things might alleviate those problems. And we kind of touch base with everybody whose day-to-day lives are intertwined with these facilities and these parks. Keeping in mind that tried to keep it capital project oriented. Although I think we were tasked with this particular CIP to be a little bit more flexible in the approach, because we wanted to be able to capture some of the outside of the box thinking, not just infrastructure, pipes, or whatever, but what studies or other things might you do to set yourself up for success? Those might be master plans, for example. So we talk with parks, public works, operations, administration, planning, water treatment, fire, police, anybody and everybody who talked to us. And we also reached out to the advisory committees, particularly with Parks and Recreation. We spoke with Parab, and we spoke with representatives from city staff who are on the Open Space Advisory Committee. And we were still kind of on the docket to do some updates with them. So right now, we're at the first draft. We issued that report in November. It's a 75% draft. The real meat is coming up. Just want to make that clear too, which starts with the prioritization workshop. It starts with city internal review of the report that we submitted. In workshop could be workshops. The stakeholders that are relevant to those particular sessions are kind of up to the city and how you want to include those folks. We're there to support it in any way possible. There are 3 points of focus in general, and that is sustainability and environmental responsibility. Operations, maintenance, and equipment, what kind of projects and efforts might be included that you haven't done in the past to increase your sustainability. We heard that loud and clear. It's in all of your long-range plans. And so we kind of look, these are just 3 different lenses that we look through when we consider some of these projects. Accessibility, ADA, it's been something that's been studied for a while. We heavily included the report that was done within the last couple of years to the extent that we could to make some of your park and recreation facilities and buildings more accessible for everybody in the city. And then aging infrastructure. If there's an opportunity to fix some aging problems, some old building issues. We just had that great discussion on Hiawatha. How do we, whenever you do one project over here to fix that aging equipment or infrastructure, what else can we do at the same time to make it make sense from an efficiency standpoint? These are our facilities of focus. This map represents this. It's kind of 3-pronged. We've got the buildings listed on the top there, parks and recreation sites, and then the water system. Really, the water system, you have a CIP process and water master planning for that. The reason that that's included is to account for new information that the city might have received through state inspections or other types of things. But to the extent that we could, we brought in the information from previous studies and adopted that. Again, just another example of how this is really just a place to pull all this information, all these great studies you've done in the past 10 years or longer, and make sure that what's relevant is in there, what's not is not, and update the places where we need to update. Some initial findings. So again, these aren't necessarily recommendations at this point. This is just thinking objectively, scientifically. Any ordering or subjective thinking on these is upcoming. So that's that real meat where the rubber meets the road. That's for the city to kind of do. But just to go over some of these kind of quickly, your city is in a couple of different drainages. Topographically, that's usually suggests that there's could be water and moisture issues with old buildings, old masonry buildings. The public library, pool and fitness center, just some examples. We just talked about Hiawatha Gardens and how it might have something. In general, the park restrooms, the public restrooms in the parks are whether it's a dimensional standard or clearance issue, there's compliance issues there. Elevator access, obviously old historic buildings. There's some code issues there. There could be elevators added. Obviously, this is again, I want to make it very clear that this is not a to-do list. This is just everything out there, a factual assessment of what's going on. There's, like I said, sustainability was a big task. Upgrading the energy usage of buildings and facilities is important. So there's installation of vandal resistant things, these kind of things that have come up in the last several years that help you with saving money and saving energy. LED lighting, occupancy sensors, we all know kind of been in buildings that have been adapted to do this. It's very long range cost savings for sustainability purposes. There's, like I mentioned before, other than a capital project, what other things could be done? And there's some consideration for master planning for the city center parks. You have a great master planning process for Soda Springs Park. It's being implemented. That kind of practice could absolutely be extended to the rest of the city. The Parks Open Space and Trails Plan could adopt smaller sub-area master plans or small park master plans as a part of the update to that process, as an example. The National Parks and Recreation, the acronym is escaping me, but the NRPA has great guidelines for when a project comes up to be more sustainable. They have great best practices. This could be a checklist or some other kind of institutionalized process that when you're considering new projects, look at these guidelines for more sustainable practices. Quickly on playgrounds, we spoke to Parab. Everybody loves the playgrounds in the city. They're fantastic. Some of them are very new and some are very great. We're talking maybe longer term on some of these. Opportunities for ADA accessible swings obviously is always a big one. And accessible routes to those swings with poured in place or other types of accessible surfaces. All these things, again, just a catalog of really good projects that you could consider in the future. Updating playgrounds in accordance with budgeting. So considering actually what is the budget? What have you historically done to update playgrounds? Seems like you've done a great job of it in the past. There was some notes from the Parab that as far as a character of Manitou, maybe in the future we consider more natural or sustainable features or all these other great sustainability things that we do in town. Let's let our playgrounds reflect this. Again, not a short-term thing, but it could be a long-term thing to include. A couple others include projects that complete the Creekside Trail. I know that's a big thing in the post plan. It's a big thing for both OSAC and Parab, really. So within the parks that we are scoped, there are opportunities to make those trail connections stronger. This one, upgrade natural surfaces to pavement within city parks. This is really referring to, I want to make this clear, referring to where the ADA standards need to be better met, where it be more compliant. The curving pathway by the pool and fitness center bathrooms, that was previously recognized in other studies before this one as a place where, surface dimensions and slope standards might be improved if they were paved. Doesn't mean that we're paving every trail by any means. That's not the intent here. In the water system, we are relying a lot on the really pretty comprehensive water planning that you've done in the past, and wastewater planning for the distribution center, the tanks, and the filtration plant. It's really just where we know that new information or new inspections have provided us new information, new resources to find out what those projects and deficiencies might need to be. We'll just update that section. We're relying on those previous plans to do the rest. There's always in the West, in Colorado, we always see needs to improve water usage and efficiency. So our engineers discussed a little bit on where can water metering be improved to really just understand what kind of water is being used citywide, whether it's a park or a house or a business or anything like that. What kind of things can you do and study to make sure that you're being the most efficient with your water metering and water use. A little bit more on the prioritization workshop coming up. As Crystal said, we've been a little bit delayed for COVID and other reasons. The world that 2020 has been it's done to us. But we're really trying to get this going probably in February. The idea of this workshop is just to do that, just to do some work, pick out a couple of specific things, some specific places, and have a roundtable discussion with the key stakeholders of what are these moves. I mean, again, this Hiawatha discussion, that's kind of a perfect example. We want to have as much coordination and incorporation of these thoughts and these task forces, particularly for Hiawatha and the public library, as we can. Those might be 5 to 7 year out projects, but this is a 2021 snapshot in time. So we want to make sure that if there are short-term projects that are being discussed or thought about in these task force or these advisory kind of groups, that we make sure we have it in this CIP. But really assigning priority and time frame to the list of projects is the main goal. We want to kind of think about the big moves with our 3 key locations, more or less, or any locations that might come up. I mean, that's really City Hall, Memorial Hall, Hiawatha, and the library. You know, what might some short-term solutions be while these longer-term plans are being completed. We want to make sure all those things are together. And then this whole CIP process is really it's getting everything out there all at once, but obviously there's budget considerations and there's budget issues, and we all know that's the realistic aspect of what we do. So we want to make sure that those things are considered in some workshop setting. We want to make sure that the city kind of guides us to support you however you may, and get the right people at the right workshops. So that's that's pretty much all I really wanted to talk about. A couple of next steps. That prioritization workshop's coming up. There's some internal review of the existing reports that we've submitted. So we have comments. We'll get comments back. We'll incorporate those comments. We'll get a 100% draft, hopefully February, March, and ideally it'd be great to be in front of council again with some more findings and final thoughts. April, maybe March if it occurs that way. So that's what I have for you as far as the presentation. Like I said, we've got Bob and Wayne here to answer any questions as well as myself. So thanks for the time.
Council members, do you have questions for Mr. Dixon or his associates? Councilor Wolf?
Thank you. When you were talking, Dave, about the prioritization workshops and the comments would be solicited and such, can you elaborate on that? What are you, are you prioritizing between these 3 buildings, for example, the City Hall, Hiawatha, and Public Library, or what did you have in mind there?
Sure. Yeah, I can start, and if anybody else from the team wants to join in, please do. But so we have a list of projects that are associated with each one of those 3, and obviously not all of those projects can be completed. Whether it's a phasing or a time frame thing, that would be helpful for you as the city to help us organize those. Not only that, though, really, we wanted this workshop to be not just about those 3, but about the citywide list that we have. I mean, there's a lot of projects on there, and
Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think I worded my question very well. What I'm trying to get at is we've already had lots of public discussion about these 3 particular buildings. And I was under the impression we already have a process in place with respect to those buildings. So I didn't know if it was, we're just sort of repeating what we've already done with that prioritization workshop, or it seems to me like we've fleshed out quite a bit even tonight on City Hall, Hiawatha, and there's been a lot of work on the public library. So I don't see the point of asking the community to send in comments about those 3 buildings at this time, but maybe I'm missing something.
No, I understand your question now. Yeah, no, I think the opportunity is just what you're saying here, is to make sure that all of these thoughts are incorporated into this particular plan at this point in time. And looking at them together with the three, not looking at them in silos, but looking at them comprehensively and thinking, well, in the short term, what happens if this happens, or what happens if something moves around, or however that shuffling might occur. So it's really just coordinating and making sure that it's all together and it's all correct from your standpoint.
But what's correct?
That this plan, this CIP, it reflects accurately what the efforts that are going on out there are.
Right. Excuse me, Denise has her hand raised. I think she might be able to provide some useful comments at this point.
I think it's not just those 3 projects, it's all the projects, right, Dave? We're going to look at all the projects that
Right.
you have on the list and really talk about the prioritization based on the facts, not just this feels good, this is the right one, but here's what we can save, here's what's the more damage that is happening here. If we don't fix it, it's going to cost more, those type of things. So we can really take the entire list of projects and prioritize accordingly.
Thank you, Denise. That's exactly right. This is probably the first time that all these things have been put in the same area, an arena to look at compared to each other. Yes, thank you.
And Dave, I guess I would add also that the intent with the workshop is with city staff and the key personnel to kind of get a sense of where that needs to happen. It wasn't intended to be for the public at this point until everybody's had a chance to see what, at least in the city side, is seeing what all this projects look like, what it adds up to, and how that might actually play out over time.
Oh, thank you. I understand it better now. And my only other comment is, and I'm guessing, it said January 12th, 2020 at the beginning of your presentation on the homepage. You might want to fix that to 2021 if it's really supposed to be today, so that in the future we know that it's not from last year.
Oh, of course. Of course, that mistake. I'm sorry about that.
Oh, no.
Apologize.
That's all I
Yes,
have.
so we'll make sure that goes to 2021 for the record. Yeah.
Other questions? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, you've given an incredibly high level overview this evening. And I admittedly, with everything that's happened over the past year, I felt very disengaged from this process. So I'd like to, on my own, get a little bit more into the details. And so hence I was wondering if I've not looked yet, but is the draft report, the 75% available on the city's website? And if so, could someone send the link to that?
Would defer to Crystal or anybody else in the city for that information.
So what I would say about that is that internal staff has not finished reviewing that 75% draft to provide a comprehensive list of comments back to Cushing Terrell. But I would also note that Cushing has a specific team member named Nora that is working directly with Alex to make sure that there is a permanent place on our website that holds this information. I would also like to reiterate the point that, this tool should be seen as a supplement to especially everything that the library group and Hiawatha Gardens is already doing. It should not be viewed as something that's in direct conflict with what those groups are already working on. If anything, this information, this factual information should be seen as a tool for them to utilize as they progress in their planning.
So Crystal, can we send that 75% report out to council to review? I know I haven't seen it and probably some others. Can we get that out so that they can just review it? Is that possible?
Sure. And I would just like to stress that it hasn't been provided before because staff just hasn't gotten the opportunity to provide those comments back to our consultants so that they can incorporate that into their documents. And
and it'll be clearly marked that it's a draft. So I think that that's perfectly okay.
Okay. No problem.
Thanks.
Denise, you got your hand up?
I just want to make a comment, and I know that at the beginning, it talked about that we do kind of a haphazard budget, and I don't think that's exactly correct. Some of it is, this is going to be great because it's going to give us a lot of facts to do it. But when we come together and we look at our CIP, we have really come together as department heads, and we've talked about them, and we've had lots of discussions. We may not have all the facts and the details that we're going to get with this, but it was very planful in our current CIP. This is going to give us some additional data to be able to make more factual decisions as we move forward. Thank you.
And I apologize for that carelessness in words, but I just wanted to ensure that council knows that this is going to be a useful tool for staff and for you as city council to drive budgeting decisions.
And I'm sorry, I'm interrupting, but if I could piggyback on that and say that when I first came on council, we had virtually no capital improvement planning documents or processes in place. Hence, large amounts of money were spent on things. It was inbox driven. It was whoever yelled the loudest would get funding. And by putting all of these SIPs in place, it's a reasoned, logical way of both budgeting and prioritizing. So I think that this is the last in a suite of capital improvement plans. And I'm just very excited that this is getting done. And I really look forward to reading a bit more about it. Thanks.
I have a question about the prioritization workshop. Who do you anticipate would be participating in that? I guess that's a question for Dave or his associates. Or
so if I could just make a comment before Dave speaks on that subject. Again, I would just go back to the fact that staff hasn't provided comments to Cushing Terrell, and we do have planned, or we do have on our agenda for next week to provide some more guidance to Cushing about who should be involved in that process. And as Dave mentioned, it may mean that we have more than one workshop. There may be a preliminary workshop between internal staff and Cushing Terrell to flush out what our approach is. And then, if I had to guess, I think our secondary approach is that we bring in some members of advisory / working groups to provide their input. But I don't believe that this tool is meant for a full public engagement process.
Thank you. Dave, if you could kind of give us your idea how you see this unfolding.
Yep, no, that's a really great summary. I don't think I have to add too much. We at a certain point, we do rely upon you to see to tell us who might be those people. I think it will be very clear after the first internal review who else needs to be on there, or if there needs to be one or two of these things. But certainly your stakeholders, ideally from the advisory groups that you already have, could possibly be great additions to that. Excuse me. And core staff and anybody who's involved in the day-to-day operation of these facilities, of course, as well, and the operation and maintenance of them.
Okay, thank you. Council members, do you have questions for the presenters? And again, like you, I can only see 5 people at a time. So if you raise your hands, I may not be able to see, and I don't mean to ignore you.
Yeah. Can we take the thing off? Can we take the?
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah, they're probably good. Yeah,
no problem. Sorry about that.
That might facilitate a better discussion. So, council members, questions, comments, concerns? I'm not seeing hands go up here, so I guess generally we're content with what we've heard. I guess one thing I would like to echo a bit would be Councillor Wolf's concern about we already we have, for instance, two pretty serious projects going on now that have quite a bit of momentum, the Hiawatha Gardens and the library. So I think there's a lot of energy in those groups already. So yeah, I certainly don't, I would be reluctant to do anything that would cause them to lose a whole lot of direction. Maybe that would be a concern.
Yep, and I would only say that this is a great opportunity and great timing then to do something like this, to make sure that the short-term ideas that are spawned from those groups come directly into this thing. So
this is intriguing, and we've got a couple of big projects that I don't know about the rest of you, but I sort of scratched my head and figure out where's the money going to come from. We told the library people they'd have to go out and raise the money. I suspect at some point that the Hiawatha Gardens people may be sent out with tin cups to go find donations as well. So, but we'll see where we get. I guess we're doing it one step at a time. Council members, if you don't, I'm sorry, Crystal, do you have a comment?
Mayor Graham, I would just echo your sentiments and say that it's good news that Cushing Terrell found those top priorities the same as we do as city council and internal staff. So the fact that they match, I think, says a lot about their work and our work, and we would not want those priorities to be different.
Good, thank you.
And Mayor, I know Roy has had his hand up.
I'm sorry, I can't. Okay, I'm sorry, Roy.
I was just gonna tag on to Mayor Pro Tem statements. I've been here 16 years and we never had a CIP. And so it was a lot of guesswork for staff on what to do next. And there's a lot of projects were probably done that could have waited and other ones that should have been priority. So I think this is gonna really help us with the priorities in the future. And I'm excited too that they were looking at the same projects that you all are looking at as priorities right now as part of that plan. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Cheney. That's helpful. Council, anything else for staff? Okay. Well, it appears that we're content with the presentation. No further questions. So I would like to thank Dave, Robert, and Wayne and Crystal again. So thank you much for your time.
And Mayor, can I just make a statement? Everybody did state that we did not have a CIP. We do have one now. So that's important to mention that we do have a CIP. It was in place, but they will compare our CIP to this to again, make sure that they're factual. So that CIP has been put in place in the last year and a half. So there is one in place, but it may not be the right one. And that's what this will do.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we'll move on then. So the next item of council business is to receive or act on council correspondence. Does anyone have anything? Mayor Pro Tem?
Yeah, I just wanted to say Match met last week and met with most of the tier one representatives of most of the tier one organizations, which are the 5, the library, Hiawatha Gardens, MAC, etc. And had a great discussion, and Neil sent council an update on that. If you haven't had a chance to read that, I would encourage you to go read Neil's email on it. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, let's move on to the city administrator's report. Mr. Cheney.
Yes, just a few things. Just so you're aware, we did shut off the parking logic street signs. And we're going to do a 2-week evaluation of the numbers and try to make sure everything's working before we turn them back on. And until we get them right, we won't turn them back on. So the other thing is the website. So Alex and Judy and myself will be looking at the website, see if there's anything we could do to simplify some of the front page so people can find, for example, documents easier, et cetera, that was brought up last week. Exciting, the Public Works facility may be done by early February. So we're getting really close on that. And the poles for the crosswalk sign should be installed tomorrow. I think it's supposed to be 60 degrees. So we got the right weather to get that accomplished. And I did have a couple questions about the south side of Manitou Avenue ice. It's a shaded area, so it tends to hold ice, even though we do our snow removal. So they got on that today, and they're making a top priority in the future to make sure they go after that the next day in that area of the crosswalk and the parking area. So that's all I got. Thank you.
Thank you. And I saw Councilor Wolf raising her hand there. Did you have a question for Roy?
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yes, just a quickie. It's my understanding that we're waiting for, we've been told for about a year now that we're waiting for some equipment to come in that supposedly would be at the east and west end of town, that would be a comprehensive summation of which parking lots have available spots. When did that get ordered? Did that get ordered? Why have we been waiting over a year? We've been told, oh, it hasn't come in yet. Well, when did it get ordered and why? What's the story? Can we have a little more disclosure?
Yes, so we once approved early last year, we placed the orders for the equipment. Of course, that was the same time COVID hit. Matter of fact, it was probably around the same week when we had started getting the announcement of the COVID shutdown. So that delayed even us getting that accomplished with them. And then they had delays. Some of the initial equipment wasn't quite right. They sent us, so we had to send it back to get it modified so it's the way we want it and the proper look in Manitou. So we had a couple things that had to go back. Now at this point, they're working on the signs. Again, delays on the Canadian border. They come from Canada. So it's very hard and they have to sit there a while for inspection. The border agents, they're short-staffed as well. So at this point, we contact Josh, who's the owner of Parking Logics last week. They showed us the final mock-ups to make sure they're right, but they're working on them. They are going to be shipping out real soon, probably before the end of the month, and then we should have them in. And these are the bigger signs that will be for each lot area. So as they drive into town, they will see these lot numbers and the occupancy. When it comes to outside, further out, we don't have big signs that will be like on Highway 24 or too far out into by the pool, because at this point, if someone's that close in the town anyway, they're going to keep coming into town. So at that point, we want them to be able to get to the parking spots and know which ones are available as they're driving in town. The other side of this is going to be whether it's apps and it's going to be used technology to get that out on what's available in town before they even leave their house. So that's probably more important, that we get the proper communication out before they even leave. And so that's going to be a big part of this process as we get everything running. So the goal is, and again, we can't control the COVID problem that has really affected everything, is to have the improved bigger signs. And what I planned on doing, Ms. Wolf, is send out a email or send it to Denise to send out to you all about like how it looks, what's the, what we expecting with this, and even some timelines of what we're going to expect to get those mailed out and or shipped out and sent to us so we can get them up. Did I answer most of them, or what other questions?
But my only follow-up is this related? I guess it's unrelated. We had talked about a reservation system so that people could know exactly where they're going to park and pay in advance. Is that separate and apart from these signs, that's a whole separate system? Because you had said at one time, I think, oh, that would be easy. We already have that at the pool, but it hasn't happened yet. Is that still on the things to do list? And when might we see that?
We're talking weekly. The TMMP is the group that talks. It's the employee group that was assigned by council in 2019. And so we are discussing how we want to manage Hiawatha and the reservation system, but that has nothing to do with the parking logic system. Now, if we implement a reservation system in Hiawatha, it will come off the parking logics. It will be spaces that are taken, so that will show up. But it's not going to be, the reservation system is not part of the parking logic system, if that makes sense. The parking logics will always just tell you up to 99% the accurate count in the lot. The reservation system would be separate. Now we have a pool system we were going to use for the incline. And that system, since we're not using it because Colorado Springs is using their system for the incline, we would use Park Mobile, and they have a reservation system that we can use, and we would look at using that for the reservations in the future. So we are talking about it on how we would implement that in Hiawatha, whether we're still working, and we are working with the COG and a reservation system that they're going to put in as well. And so we're working on how we're going to manage that with Hiawatha. So there's a lot of talking going on, trying to figure out the best way to handle parking when May comes around.
So Roy, would it be a fair statement then that there's consensus that we will have a reservation system at Hiawatha, or are you still all talking about if you like that idea or not?
Yeah, we're trying to make sure that it's needed. I mean, the thought is, okay, reservations would be good, but keep in mind, if we have reservations, we're going to have to staff that, because you have to make sure that reservation is held for the person. So if you take the risk of just saying, we believe that space will be open, and then it's not, that's when you get unsatisfied people that try to find a spot. And that happened up at Bar. Bar had a lot of problems years ago when they did the reservation system because of lack of enforcement. So we'd have to make sure we have enforcement, the money to do enforcement. And then the question is, do we need it at Hiawatha is the question. Maybe we do, and I'm not saying we don't, but we haven't determined yet that we need it yet. We do feel, however, that, and the COG agrees that they have to figure out a reservation system up there. So.
Well, I'm not interested in what the COG thinks or what the COG wants, but I am interested in getting a reservation system for Hiawatha. It would be extremely easy to pay someone to manage that system. If we're charging for Hiawatha, the math is incredible. I mean, it's easy to pay somebody if we're charging for parking. So in other words, there's no deadline for when a reservation system will begin, because you all are still debating on whether you like the idea. Do I have that right? I mean, I'm not trying to be argumentative. I just want to make sure I get.
Can I interrupt?
I thought it was already decided. And
okay, Julie, I think we're getting too far into this subject. This is something we didn't declare in an agenda, and I think that's what Judy wants to call to our attention. Judy, is that correct?
Yes, thank you.
And Roy will be coming, I think, March at the work session. He's going to be bringing everything to council and talking about all of this and getting your feedback at that point. So I think it's the March, I can give you the exact date. He is the only one on the agenda right now. That is the plan, because I expect it to take some time. It's the March 9th work session.
Oh,
say the workshop there a second. You know, there's a lot of moving parts here, and so Roy, we're going to spend the whole evening focused on that.
Yeah, and I want to promise you, we haven't forgotten that. We are looking at the reservation system, so it's not forgotten. And I heard you last when you brought it up, and it's something we're investigating the best way to do it and everything. So it's gonna come up in the March session.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Great. City Administrator's report, Denise.
Just a couple of things is Alex is working on the final touches to the annual report, and you guys will get a copy of it. It may be the first annual report that the city's ever done. I don't know, but it's been at least some time since that's been done. So we're getting ready to finalize that, and then we'll get a copy out to all of you and to the public to be able to see. There was a meeting today with the Chamber and Planning and Creative District and the restaurants to really talk about, to encourage the collaboration and work through temporary permitting process for COVID-19. So they're working. I will tell you this week, tomorrow I'm having a meeting with all the regional city administrators talking about the 5-star program. So I will give updates as I receive that and where we are with those things. And then where I'm working on finalizing the 2020 KPIs. And when I get that finalized and verify all the numbers, I'll make sure that that's made public and you guys will get a copy of it. I think you'll be impressed of everything that we've been tracking. And it's the first time that the city has really tracked these type of things. So in 2 or 3 years, we'll be able to see trends and really look and see what we need to do and how we might be able to change things for best practices. So I'll be getting that to you hopefully in the next week or so. And it will be on the website when that becomes public.
Great. Okay. Thank you, Denise.
Tell us what can you just say what a KPI means?
Key performance indicators.
Can you
So-
explain what that is?
It's kind of, this one is tracking what you really, every department usually has key performance indicators so they can track and say, what is it that we're doing, or what is, it may be customer satisfaction, right? And we're also, I want to mention, we're hoping to get our first customer satisfaction survey out in March is the goal. But it's saying overall, here's the goal, is to hit this key performance indicator. We're not there of setting goals yet, but it tracks, for instance, right now we're tracking the number of public events, the revenue from public events, the number of private events, the number of times that we're listed in the media, the number of times that we have a Facebook posting, the number of times that it's shared, the number of potholes we fill, the number of phone calls we get, the number of utility bills, what's our bad debt, all of that, and it's in one piece of paper so you can really look at it. And over a year, a couple of years, you can look at trends, and then it's better to look at staffing levels, to make decisions. It's a good way to really make business decisions, but we need some data before we can do that and do some comparisons.
Oh, that was very helpful. Thank you.
You bet.
Good, yes, thank you. Anything else, Denise?
I think that's it. It's been a
Okay,
big,
great. Well, I think that's everything we set out to do tonight. So if there's no objection, we'll go ahead and adjourn and call it a night. Okay,
thanks, everyone.
no objections. Okay, all right. Good night. Thank you all.
Good night.
Take care. Stay safe.